Let's step away from Shakespeare for a moment and talk about his contemporary, a man who was as famous in his day as Shakespeare was, Ben Jonson. He was a man with a truly fascinating life, from soldier to playwright. Ben Jonson was born in Westminster, and his father died before he was even born. He ended up adopting the trade of his stepfather, who was a master bricklayer, before he became a soldier in the Low Countries. But his real life's work was in the theatre. In 1597, he began working as both an actor and playwright with the Lord Admiral's company, a fact that has been asked in exam. Now, here's the golden trick. The Admiral's men were a huge deal in Elizabethan and Jacobean England, closely associated with none other than Christopher Marlowe himself. This key detail has also been asked in exam. Ben Jonson was a man of passion, and his life was not without its drama. In 1598, he killed a fellow actor in a duel and narrowly escaped the gallows. This is a point that has been asked in exam, so let's be careful to remember it. With the accession of King James I in 1603, masques became incredibly popular, and Jonson found a great deal of success writing them for the court. You might have heard of the legendary meetings at the Mermaid Tavern in 1612. Jonson, along with other scholars and intellectuals like Francis Beaumont, was a regular. Hold that thought, because here's something you probably didn't expect. Despite popular belief, there is no evidence that Shakespeare or Sir Walter Raleigh ever attended these meetings. Finally, Jonson was buried in Westminster Abbey, a truly rare honor for a playwright, and over his grave was placed the famous epitaph, "O rare Ben Jonson," a beautiful tribute that has been asked in exam. We've talked about Ben Jonson's life, but let's dive into his work, because that's where his genius truly shines. His writings range from powerful plays to insightful prose. First, let's talk about one of his most famous prose works, Timber, or Discoveries Made Upon Men and Matter. This book was published posthumously in 1641, and its full title has been asked in exam. It's a collection of his thoughts and observations, and it's where he delivers one of his most famous lines about language. You'll love this part. He writes, "Language most shows a man, speak that I may see thee." He's arguing that how a person speaks is the truest reflection of their character, more accurate than a mirror. This famous quote and the work it's from have both been asked in exam. Now here's a golden trick. Let's talk about his early comedies. Ben Jonson began his career with Every Man in His Humour in 1598. He followed that up with Every Man Out of His Humour in 1599, then Cynthia's Revels in 1600 and The Poetaster in 1601. These plays are fantastic examples of the humours theory, where a character's personality is shaped by one dominant trait or humour. They're a witty and clever look at human nature. Alright, let's walk through Ben Jonson's works, and I'll give you some quick mnemonics along the way to make them exam proof. Let's start with the plays. A Tale of a Tub, 1596, revised 1633. The Isle of Dogs, 1597, with Thomas Nashade now lost, it was asked in exam. The Case is Altered, 1597 to 98. Remember the code, A Tale of Dogs Case. Now, his most famous humour plays, Every Man in His Humour, 1598. Every Man Out of His Humour, 1599. Cynthia's Revels, 1600. The Poetaster, 1601. Use this code, In-Out Humour reveals the Poetaster. Moving forward, Sejanus, His Fall, 1603. Eastward Ho, 1605, with Marston and Chapman, it was asked in exam. Volpone, 1605 to 06. Epicoene, or The Silent Woman, 1609. The Alchemist, 1610. Use this memory aid, Volt Network, Volpone, Epicoene, The Alchemist, Eastward Ho. Amber. Then Catiline, His Conspiracy, ND 5, 1611. Bartholomew Fair, 1614. The Devil is an Ass, 1616. Use the code, Cats Don't Bark But Mew on Devil. Later works include The Staple of News, 1626, The New Inn, or The Light Heart, 1629. The Magnetic Lady or Humours Reconciled, 1632. The Sad Shepherd, 1637. Remember this as the second last work. Mortimer, His Fall, 1637, his last work. Now, on to the masks. Jonson wrote 36 in total, the key 4 to memorize. The Mask of Blackness, 6 January 1605. The Mask of Beauty, 10 January 1608. The Mask of Beauty, 10 January 1608. The Mask of Queens, 2 February 1609. Oberon the Fairy Prince, 1 January 1611. Quote this as Black Beauty Queen and Prince. Next, the other works. Epigrams, 1612. The Forest, 16, which includes the country house poem To Penshurst. On My First Son, 1616, his famous elegy. A Discourse of Love, 1618. His translation of Horace's Art of Poetry, 1640. Underwood, 1640. English Grammar, 1640. Timber or Discoveries, 1641. A kind of commonplace book. And don't forget to Celia, better known as Drink to Me Only with Thine Eyes. So, here's the exam trick. When you hear Ben Jonson, think humour plays, Walpole Alchemist Group, masks like Blackness and Queens, and short poems like On My First Son and To Celia. Let's dive into one of Ben Jonson's most important plays, Every Man in His Humour. This play marked a real shift in English theatre, bringing a new kind of social comedy to the stage. It was first performed in 1598 by the Lord Chamberlain's men, a fact that has been asked in exam. The play introduced a new style offering a direct look at the time's deformities, the habits, language and humour of contemporary London. This fresh approach to comedy is a key point that's been asked in exam. And here's something you probably didn't expect. It has been suggested that none other than William Shakespeare himself took on the role of Kenowell, the aged father. This is a fascinating bit of history that has also been asked in exam, so let's be sure to remember it. The plot is a hilarious chain of misunderstandings, all starting with old Noel, who is worried his son is spending too much time on poetry. Hold that thought, because things get wild when Noel intercepts a letter and reads some disparaging remarks about himself. This small action has been asked in exam. So remember it. Suspicious. Noel orders his servant Brainworm to secretly deliver the letter, a specific instruction that has also been asked in exam. But Brainworm tells the son what his father did, setting off a chain of pranks and disguises. You love this part. Brainworm disguises himself as a soldier and a fake sword salesman, while another character, Kitely, becomes consumed with jealousy over his wife. These misunderstandings lead to fights and lawsuits, all fueled by the characters' personal humours. The play ends with a comic mix of accusations and silly lawsuits, perfectly capturing the chaos of London life. Let's explore some of Ben Jonson's later works and his involvement in a fascinating rivalry in the London theatre scene. Every Man Out of His Humour. This play, premiering in 1599, was written as a more ambitious sequel to Every Man in His Humour. It holds the distinction of being the longest play ever written for the Elizabethan public theatre. Jonson intended it to be a sophisticated comedy in the style of the Greek playwright Aristophanes. It included unique features like an induction and commentaries between acts. However, the play was a disaster in the public theatres, which pushed Jonson to work with private theatres. This shift is notable because these private theatres were often used by companies of young boys, a point that's been asked in exam. The play contained an allusion to John Marston's Histiomastics and was one of the first shots fired in what became known as the War of the Theatres, a rivalry that has been asked in exam. The Poetaster. The rivalry intensified with the Poetaster, which was a direct attack on Jonson's rivals John Marston and Thomas Dekker in the Poetomachia or War of the Theatres. This back-and-forth literary feud has been asked in exam. In the play, Jonson represented himself as the character Horace, while Crispinus, who vomits up bombastic words, and Demetrius Fannius represented Marston and Decker, respectively. Jonson used this play to express his views on a poet's moral duties in society and to satirize what he considered to be bad poets. The play is considered an attempt to combine philosophical ideas with satire, a fact that's been asked in exam. Eastward Ho is a significant play because it was a collaboration between Jonson and his rivals, George Chapman and John Marston. This collaboration is a key fact for the exam and has been asked in exam. The play is a citizen comedy set in London and following a goldsmith and his two apprentices. The title itself is a playful allusion to Thomas Dekker and John Webster's play Westward Ho. The rivalry continued as Dekker and Webster then wrote Northward Ho in response, a fact that has also been asked in exam. Volpone, written between 1605 and 1606, is widely regarded as one of Ben Jonson's finest plays and a classic of the Jacobean era. It draws on elements of city comedy and beast fable, a blend that's been asked in exam. Its clever plot and satirical characters make it Jonson's most performed work. The play is centered around a rich, childless Venetian nobleman named Volpone, meaning the sly fox. He spends his days pretending to be on his deathbed, tricking three greedy men, a lawyer named Voltaire, the vulture, a merchant named Corvino, the carrion crow, and an old miser named Corbaccio, the raven. These three characters are also a key part of the play and their roles have been asked in exam. Volpone's servant, Mosca, the fly, helps him manipulate these gold diggers, each of whom brings Volpone extravagant gifts in the hope of being named his heir. The central conflict escalates when Volpone, in an attempt to further his trickery, decides to seduce Corvino's wife, Celia. This specific act has been asked in exam. Corvino, blinded by the promise of inheritance, actually offers Celia to Volpone. When Volpone tries to rape her, her son Bonario interrupts. Bonario's name has also been asked in exam. In the play, Volpone is also accompanied by his companions, the dwarf Nano, the hermaphrodite Androgino, and the eunuch Castron. The plot spirals out of control as Volpone, in a moment of arrogance, fakes his death and names Mosca as his sole heir. But Mosca, in a clever twist, refuses to give up the fortune, leading to a showdown in court where the judges or avocatori preside. In the end, Volpone confesses everything, and everyone involved in the deceit is punished for their greed. The play's other notable characters include the ridiculous English traveller Sir Politic Woodby and his wife Lady Woodby, the parrot, whose name has also been asked in exam. Another sophisticated English traveller, Peregrine, is also a key figure and his name has been asked in exam. Ben Jonson's Epicene, or The Silent Woman, is a brilliant city comedy from 1609 about a scheme to secure an inheritance. It was first performed by a company of boy actors, the Blackfriars Children. The play is notable for being written almost entirely in prose, excluding its two prologues. The central character, Morose, is a wealthy gentleman who absolutely despises noise. He plans to disinherit his nephew, Dauphin, by getting married. In response, Dauphin, along with his friend Truewit and a barber named Cutbeard, devises a plan to trick his uncle. This scheme, along with Truewit's involvement, has been asked in exam. Cutbeard presents a supposedly quiet and obedient woman named Epicene to Morose. Morose is thrilled with her apparent silence and marries her. However, as soon as the marriage ceremony is over, Epicene transforms into a loud, nagging and boisterous wife. Morose's quiet home is then overrun by a variety of noisy characters, including the ladies' collegiates, who discuss their views on men. The climax occurs when a frantic Morose tries to get a divorce but can't find legal grounds. This is when Dauphin reveals the golden trick. Epicene is a boy in disguise. The marriage is annulled and Dauphin gets his inheritance, while Morose is left with nothing. Ben Jonson's The Alchemist, written around 1610, is a brilliant Jacobean comedy that satirizes the greed and foolishness of its characters. The play is set in London during a plague, which is why a man named Lovett leaves his townhouse. This setting is a key plot point and has been asked in exam. His servant Jeremy takes advantage of his absence by becoming a master schemer known as Face, a transformation that has also been asked in exam. Face teams up with a conman named Subtle and a prostitute named Doll Common, turning Lovett's house into a hub for their fraudulent schemes. This setup has been asked in exam. Subtle pretends to be an expert in alchemy and astrology, and a long line of victims comes to them seeking riches and power. This includes Sir Epicure Mammon, who believes Subtle can create the philosopher's stone, a fact that has been asked in exam. Sir Epicure dreams of immense wealth and pleasure. Other customers include Puritan elders, a gamester, and a simple tobacconist. The play is a hilarious satire where each customer is punished for their vices. In a climax of chaos, all the swindled customers return at once. However, before their schemes can be exposed, Lovett unexpectedly returns to his home. Subtle and Doll flee with the stolen goods, but Face, reverting to his identity as Jeremy, stays behind and conspires with Lovett to cover everything up. This plot twist has been asked in exam. The play ends with Lovett marrying a wealthy widow and keeping all the money, leaving the con artist to triumph. Let's dive into some fascinating and often confusing facts about two great writers. It's a bit like a game of literary trivia, so let's get started. Now, here's a golden trick that's been in the exam. Can you recall a famous work called A Tale of a Tub? The trick is that there are two famous ones. First, there's Jonathan Swift's version, which is a brilliant prose satire. It was written between 1694 and 1697 and published in 1704. It's a parody of the main branches of Western Christianity, and this fact has been asked in exam. But hold that thought, because Ben Jonson also wrote a play with the same name. His A Tale of a Tub is a comedy. It was the last play of his to be staged during his lifetime in 1633, and it was published in 1640. The fact that this is a stage play by Jonson has also been asked in exam. So, when you see that title in the exam, be sure to check the author.